can identify the tense, figuring out how to put it in English.
It's the difficulty. Okay. Alright, so then if that's the case, let's see if I can remember all the tenses we've covered and then maybe walk through how to translate.
Did you find a Bible? I sent you some links on.
I haven't got it yet.
Oh, you get them used and they look brand new and they're crap.
Present, future. We did active and middle. Present, future, and then we went from there to the imperfect. Hopefully. Active, and we haven't covered the middle or the passive, that's tonight. Present, future, imperfect, we did aorist, active, and passive. We will cover the middle tonight. We did pluperfect, but I'm not even going to touch that one. So that leaves the perfect. And we did the perfect, active, did we do middle and passive with that as well? I think we did.
Yeah, we did. That was the last chapter I read.
Yes. Very good. Alright, so I'm not going to give you all the forms of this, because I think that one, that would take too long, and two, they're in the back of the book, so if you really are in need of them, you could do that. But I do think that it would be helpful to give you a general translation.
So what's the difference between middle and passive again in English?
We will get right there.
Okay.
So let's take, for instance, the verb luo. For the active, and this is probably a good time to change pens, it would be I am loosing or destroying. How about we just use the word destroy? Because loosing sort of leaves it out there, for me at least, in the abstract, so we don't use it too often. I am destroying. We could also make it simple and just say I destroy. Right? And the difference between those two is just stressing the continuity of the action and I am destroying versus simple present, I destroy. Middle would be I myself destroy. I destroy myself, depending upon the context. Reciprocal or reflexive. The passive is I am being destroyed. Or simply, I am destroyed. So the difference between the active and the passive is that the subject, I, has gone from doing the acting of destroying to being acted upon. I am being destroyed. Future, I will destroy. I think we all have that one down. I will destroy myself. Or I myself will destroy. Sorry. I myself will destroy. Imperfect. Now let's start asking some questions. Imperfect is what? What features? And I'm not talking about the Greek features, just so far as translation. imperfect versus the aorist. Imperfect is going to stress continuity of action, so like the I am destroying, but instead of being in the present tense so far as English is concerned, it's in the past. So I was destroyed.
Continuous action.
Continuous action.
Okay.
Aorist is simple past, is how we described it. I destroyed.
So an imperfect is similar to
The
Passive.
the imperfect is similar to
no, I'm sorry, the middle.
the present continuing aspect.
Okay.
It's just in the past tense continuing. I was
Okay.
destroying. It is easy to get confused because I was being destroyed will be passive of the imperfect. That's what we'll learn tonight. I was being destroyed. So I guess we can add over here passive since we're going to do it tonight. I was being destroyed. The passive of the aorist is I was destroyed. Good. And I do realize that in English this gets very complicated because helping verbs like was and is are being used to both form the passive and also being used to form the past tense. So you have to keep those straight in English. The perfect, I have destroyed. The middle, I myself have destroyed. Or I have destroyed myself. And finally, the passive, I have been destroyed. Does this help?
Yep.
So those are the tenses we've covered, and the voices that we've covered for those tenses, excluding this one obviously because we haven't done it, and we haven't done aorist middle, which we'll cover tonight as well. And that should only leave the future passive, I think, for tenses in the indicative mood left to cover. Perfect. Yes, aorist and future passive. So we have not done aorist passive. Sorry. All right. Should I leave this up here for a few more minutes? Good. Because I'm sure you have plenty of questions about whatever exercises you decided to do. And if you don't, then we'll jump right on into whatever questions you have about last week. And if we have none of those, as I'm sure you have already deduced, we will go to the next lesson.
So you learned all this from Black himself?
No, I learned Greek Grammar 1 and 2 from Dr. Van Lanningham at Moody. But,
Mike Van Lanningham?
yep.
He was one of my old pastors.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's quite the
What a
coincidence.
Yeah.
small world.
Yeah. Christian worlds.
In Chicago or? Oh,
Yeah, that area. Yeah.
They're cheese people. From
very, very small world. Yes, he was my my Greek 1 and 2 professor, and he taught out of Nathan Croy, not out of Black.
Okay.
So from Black, I learned
But you so you had him for.
Greek 4, Greek 5, Septuagint, and a number of other classes.
Okay.
But yeah, I came to Southeastern having already learned Greek. I find this approach to be the easiest because of the way that it's morphologically based as opposed to learning each individual forms. That's why I switched textbooks. But questions about last week?
What do you, sorry.
Yeah, no.
What do you mean by morphologically based instead of forms?
Well, like with Van Lamingham was actually really good about teaching us the various endings in building the tenses, but I guess the textbook didn't force that into you. With this, at least in my opinion, he develops primary and secondary endings, primary active, secondary active, primary, middle passive, and secondary middle passive, and forces you to build the tenses on that basis as opposed to learning them by rote.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also, I find the book to be organized better, so you learn the present and the future at the same time, and it makes you feel like you've learned more than you really have, because all you have to do is add the sigma. You know, it made it a lot easier when I'm thinking through teaching this than maybe Corey did.
Okay.
Even though I still have a soft spot for that book, because it was the one that I learned Greek in. I found that the book you learn Greek in is the one that you most frequently go back to, because when I learned from Croy and I was teaching it to others, I'd be able to know exactly what chapter a particular topic was located in, like almost to the page number, and would constantly be referencing that instead. So it took a lot for me to break away from that and move on over to this.
So what got you, I don't want to take too much time, but what got you like into Greek more I guess than you had to be for your career?
That's a good question.
Phrase that.
So I took Greek Grammar 1 and 2 under Van Lamingham, and I didn't do particularly bad or great. I got B pluses. It was probably one of the hardest classes that I had taken, and I was looking for a job. So I got a tutoring job in Greek, which forced me to learn it and fall more in love with it. And I had a great professor, Dr. Bateman, for Greek 4 at Moody, and he did an you have your deductive approach to learning syntax and exegesis, like Wallace, for instance. It gives you all of the different categories, and you have to memorize those. And he did an inductive approach, so he walked us through the books of 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and when categories arose, then he'd say this is how John is particularly using this category of the genitive or whatever. He laid out what independent and dependent clauses were and how they related to one another, and it just opened up my world. And then when I went to Southeastern, having a class with Dr. Black is about the most intimidating thing that you can do. He comes into class and he's asking you what some obscure principal part this comes from, or how to, class give me the future passive of Ericomine, and everybody's sitting there like, I don't know, I probably couldn't tell it to you right now, but the man just is a wealth of knowledge, and you realize how little you truly know Greek, and makes you strive to learn it more. So, or at least me.
Yeah.
So Greek and Hebrew are my passions. So I try to learn them as best as I can and hopefully communicate that. I hope that someone answers.
Yeah, no, that's good.
On with the show.
Yeah, if you want to stall some more, that's fine. I'm just messing with you. In seriousness, though, any particular concept is sticky over the week. Past 2 weeks. I know you said you weren't able to get to it, and that's fine.
study.
Did you? Well, speak up then, girl. Why we bring you in?
Okay then. If you don't have anything off the top of your head, then we'll move to 14. This will start to introduce a little new material, but luckily, 2 weeks ago, I started to talk about the secondary passive, middle and passive endings anyway. Secondary, middle, passive endings, we have main, and we're on page 97 or at the beginning of chapter 14. Sa, and we'll just go ahead and put it up there without any sort of explanation, U, and this is one of the forms you'll learn. Third singular is ta. First plural is metha. Second plural is ista. Third plural is nta. These correspond to primary MP endings, and we've already learned these, or should have my, psi, tai, metha, ista, anta. And those were applied to things like the present, middle, and passive. So the good thing about this is this half is almost the same. And you just have to memorize main, sa, ta, or all of it if you don't remember this half. Main, sa, ta, metha, ista, anta. Main, sa, ta, metha, ista, anta. These secondary active middle and passive endings will be applied to your imperfect, middle, and passive conjugations. Your aorist middle, and your pluperfect middle passive. That might be sitting up there in the abstract at the moment. So let's take it from the abstract and build.
Jacob, I got two endings for the second singular middle passive. No, I've only got one.
Yes, on that, he's only going to give you the one, and he's not going to be able to explain to you
When to use one or the other.
when to use one or the other.
Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, in all of the instances except for the pluperfect, which we really don't care about because it gets used so rarely, you're going to use the u ending and not the sa ending. It was sort of like when we did my, psi, tai, metha, ista, untai, but we used the a ending, my, a, tai. What had happened, if you remember, was the sigma dropped out, there was contraction with the alpha, and the iota became a eta with a iota subscript. Nothing to trouble yourself out about too much at the moment. All right. For the imperfect, middle and passive. This is how we put all of this knowledge to use of Lua. How do we build our imperfect? First thing we do.
Root.
Almost. We do identify our root. I guess it's a little tricky thing to say what's the first thing we do. So we've got Lu, but what do we do with Lu in the imperfect? We
You have to add an epsilon to it.
add the epsilon augment, right? Epsilon augment for the imperfect plus Lu for your root plus, do we have anything else for the imperfect? Do we have a sigma? Do we have reduplication? Do we have anything like that? No. So it's just the augment, the root, connecting vowel, which in front of main, right, and new is omicron, and then just our ending, which is the secondary middle passive ending. The luame. And for the sake of your eyes, we'll do that. And we'll just use this as sort of a building place. And luame for the first singular. Second singular, we're going to do the same thing, right? We have the augment, the root, lu, and then we kind of have the connecting vowel built into the ending there. Elulu. Third singular. Lu. And then connecting vowel. Ta. Luata. Lu. Somebody else.
Amatha.
Amatha. Alright, Lu, someone else. Esta, right? So, epsilon, Eluista. And hopefully we can get one other person, Elu. Anta.
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 We went from epsilon to omicron.
Right, remember, so maim and nu, mu and nu. Kept on saying that wrong and I knew it was Hebrew. Mu and nu have the omicron for its connecting vowel before it. So notice that. There's your paradigm for the imperfect middle passive of luo. In translating that, we would have I, myself, for the middle, was destroying. I myself was destroying, or I was destroying myself. For the passive, it would be I was destroyed. We have he has a list of them right here at the top of 99. Elu amein, I was loosing myself, or I was destroying myself. I was destroying for myself, or I myself was destroying or loosing. The imperfect passive was I was being loosed or destroyed. I was being loosed or destroyed. And for the aorist, he gives this just for comparison. I loosed myself, or I destroyed myself, I destroyed for myself, or I myself destroyed. Questions?
Do you need the word was?
For the imperfect you do, because the imperfect is stressing the continuation of action. So that does that for us.
So for the connecting vowel, a rule of thumb would be omicron before mu and nu.
Yeah, a rule of thumb.
Okay.
Rules of thumb don't always pan out, but yes.
And then epsilon everywhere else.
Mhm.
Okay.
Not always going to work, but yeah. That's at least the way that I've memorized it myself.
Are we going to get to one to use saw and one to use oo?
You're really using saw. What's happening is it's dropping out and then it's contracting. So elu, sa, lu is sa, I believe. And then they don't like the sound that the sigma makes where it is. So it loses it. Then we have elu et a. And then we have two vowels that are contracting with one another, which means that we now have elu, u. So it's not as if we're choosing when to use sa versus u, because u isn't truly an ending, it's the result of dropping the sigma and contracting the vowels. I only put this up here as one or the other because it seems to simplify. It's one of those places where I choose to go for rote memorization as opposed to explanation. But now you have both. Then we have the second aorist middle, and that's no different than what we just covered here. The only difference is that, like our second aorists, we have stem changes. Instead of writing out the whole paradigm, take for instance LAPO, which means I hope. In the second aorist, we're going to add the augment, and then we're going to add the second aorist stem, which has changed from LAPO. It becomes lip. And then from there, we simply add our connecting vowel and endings, elipon. And if you wanted to look at that paradigm, it's right there on page 99 in your chart. Elipon, elipu, elipeto, elipeta, elipamen, elipeste, elipanta.
What's LAPO?
I hope. I think.
And so it translates. How does
I
hope
leave.
transfer?
Sorry, I
That's
leave.
what you said, so I think I heard.
That's why I'm thinking that.
Page 2.
That is Otis. So it was a little too similar for me. Now, translating that, we have I leave or I am leaving for the present. And just because it's a second aorist versus a first aorist doesn't mean that we have any change in translation. It's just I left. Or I was left, rather. This is middle. We're only doing aorist middle, not aorist passive. So I myself left, or I left myself. Or I left for myself.
So there's no difference in meaning, just different form.
Correct.
Okay. So just more to memorize.
Correct. Again. Yeah, and we do that too, right? Swim, swam, swum. Just an irregular verb. Hang, hung, hanged. All sorts of fun there. But yeah, no change in meaning whatsoever. And for the pure sake of being thorough, we'll do the pluperfect. There is one example in the book of the pluperfect, so I would hate for you to be confused.
How many pluperfects are in the New Testament?
If I had my computer with me, I'd be able to tell you, but I think it's somewhere under the 20 mark,
Yeah.
somewhere around there. Now, you'll find it in other literature, like the Septuagint, although I think it's pretty rare in the Septuagint as well. You might find it more in the Apostolic Fathers or somewhere around there than you will in the New Testament. And I think, and I can be corrected on this point, that a lot of the ones that you will find are in Luke, for instance.
Okay. All right, this is off topic again, but do you know Italian?
I do not.
Do you know, what other languages do you know?
And by know, I'm only saying that I know how to read,
Okay.
not write, not compose, not speak. I'm working on relearning my ecclesiastical Latin at the moment. I was talking to Debbie about that. It's been a painful process, much like you guys coming back in here and learning Greek. I took a year and a half after having taught myself, not translating anything, and now I'm translating a 28-page document that is going very, very and painfully slow. Like, rip what little hair I have out. Like, slow. Greek, Hebrew, and I knew Syriac at one point.
French.
And I learned French in high school, and it wasn't much of a learning process. I started learning German, because I was going to need that for my PhD.
Yeah.
And I have since put that on hold. Hopefully that'll pick up soon. I'm not great at language. I know Greek and Hebrew best. All right, so for our pluperfect, we're going to build the perfect tense. So we're going to have it reduplication, and then we're going to have our middle, secondary, middle, and passive endings, but the only difference is that we're going to add an augment in front of it. So it's epsilon plus plus reduplication, redu plus root, plus, and this is one of the tricky ones because you do not have a connecting vowel, plus no connecting vowel. I only put that so you remember it, not that you need to. Plus secondary MP endings. Clear as mud, right? So epsilon there. Remember we have luo. Our root is lu. So and when we reduplicate it, I think it's, oh goodness, let me kick myself. Is it an upsilon or is it an epsilon? Epsilon. That's what I thought. Ele, lu, main. Ele, lu, u. Ele, lu, ta. Ele, lu, ta. What does that mean? I had been loosed. I had been loosed. You had been loosed. You can also do the middle, so I myself had loosed. I myself had destroyed.
Then yeah, your sigma's on.
What now?
Oh, your second singular. That's like
Oh yes, this is the one where it is elusa. My apologies. Good catch.
Yeah. I like to say I did that.
Had.
I just thought you meant the top one.
Yes, that's what I did. Precisely. All right.
So
Those
I
are our
say that in
forms.
English.
For this one, let's adopt the passive so that it's easier for me, and I don't have to go through like 3 different versions of the middle. I had been loosed, or I had been destroyed. You had been destroyed. He, she, or it had been destroyed. We had been destroyed. You, plural, had been destroyed. And they had been destroyed. See, the difference here in the perfect, it would have been I have been destroyed, right? So it has past time in view with continuing consequences, right? So I have been destroyed. It still affects me in some way. This is focusing on the past nature of it. I had been destroyed. Slight nuance difference. And that is it so far as the lesson is concerned. The vocabulary is rather light as well, which is surprising because a lot of the times when it's an easier lesson so far as syntax is concerned, and I'm not saying the lesson is easy by any stretch of the imagination, he'll load you up on vocabulary. Not so today. We have amen.
Amen.
Yep, exactly. And you can pronounce with me if you want. Truly. Axios.
Axios.
Worthy or worthily. Ingus. Near. Eke.
Okay.
There. Or in that place.
Do we have that, Jacob? The near and far pronouns?
No, you do. You have the near and far demonstrative pronouns.
Right.
But this is like he drew near to me. The
Oh.
near demonstrative is not, it doesn't mean near, it just means this versus that. That is the
Right.
far one, this is the close
Oh,
one.
okay. I look familiar.
Yeah. Then we have
Whose thoughts?
euthus,
Usage.
immediately, at once. Exo,
I would grab that and do a root fallacy. I think it's good something.
yeah,
See,
don't do that.
Don't do that.
Something like good God or something along
Yeah.
those lines.
Or euangelos. Good message.
Yeah. No, euthus is immediately or at once. Exo.
Does the, I'm sorry to camp on this one, but does
Sorry.
the accent over the upsilon mean that it does not apply? Is that a good way to prevent that fallacy?
No, it does. It has nothing to do with it at all. The root fallacy is something to avoid at all times unless it is helpful. In memorizing vocabulary.
My attention even like Eucharist.
Right.
Saw that. And I'd come to the conclusion that meant good gift.
Yes, but I would not say that because Eucharist is also Eucharisto. Is also just a meal. So. I believe I eat. I'll have to look it up for you. Your safest bet is to go to a lexicon. Exo, and here's where you can get away with referring to other words you know. Ek means out, exo is outside. Hutos, thus, or in this manner. He did thus. Pantate, always. Pate, win.
Back to my favorite fallacy, the pantate. The pan.
Pon means all, yeah.
Okay.
Or pos means all, so yes, that somewhat works there.
Okay. Love that fallacy.
Hode,
Hold it.
here, or in this place. Alright? The vocabulary is light, but they're adverbs, which means they are a little more tricky in memorizing. But do make sure you get them. Take a quick break. We'll just go through do exercises. So in honesty, how would be the most comfortable and convenient way to continue doing exercises? That way nobody feels on the spot.
I don't know a nice way to do these exercises.
I don't mind. Just
Okay.
walk through them,
You
quick
can spot
jog
it.
and-
Just do it, keep doing it the same way.
Filling in gaps when somebody stops and somebody else has the answer.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm not like browbeating anybody or like getting morale down by continuing to do this. So, okay then, we'll start off with number 1 and just how about we do it where you pronounce, and you translate together, like you do both, unless you don't feel comfortable with translating, and then you pass it on to the next person. Fair enough?
Oh, I'll word number 1 for you.
It's asking for it.
Oi, gap, logoi, toi, prompt, a toi,
Prophetu.
okay, prompt toi, egg, broth, onto, and, is it toe?
Mhm.
Biblio.
Perfect.
Now, the toe and the biblio are in the dative form. Because
Yes.
it's got little squiggles in
Mhm.
it. So something in the Bible.
Good.
The oi has to do with the nominative, the subject, and it's plural.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming that logoi is what it's attached to.
Yes.
But I'm not sure why that little gap is between the oi and the and the subject.
It's gar. And can anyone help fill in this gap with the gar?
For
It means for, right? But why is it breaking up the hoi and the logoi?
It's false positive.
Right, it's post-positive, and I'm sure that means nothing still. What that means is it must be somewhere other than first word. Most of the time, that means it'll be in the second position, but it can go a little bit further back.
well, isn't it goy? I mean, sorry, gar, oi, logoi.
Because gar cannot come first. It can't be the first word in a clause or a sentence.
Who says?
The Greek language. Another word like that is de. De cannot be first.
So it's a post-positive
Conjunction.
conjunction.
Yeah, it has to be second or further. Most of the time, second.
But they're always or usually translated in first in English.
Always, almost always translated first in English. Almost always.
So for the words of the prophet,
Yep. Let Debbie pick back up though. So for the we got for the words.
words, of the prophet, let's see,
prophet, but
it's like something in the Bible. For
Okay,
the words of
good.
the prophet, something in the Bible.
For the words of the prophet, something in the Bible. So let's.
It's from,
And it's easy to go ahead and give the answer, but let's do exactly what Susan was starting to do. What is it from?
crops.
Not grapho. Grapho, good. So it's from grapho. Now looking at the word grapho, what features do we find in a graphanta?
Well, you've added the past tense little
Perfect.
epsilon in front of it.
So this will allow us to eliminate it down to one of two tenses, the imperfect or the aorist. This is the way I think through it, if I don't know right off the top of my head. So we've eliminated it down to the imperfect or the aorist because we have the epsilon. Now what I ask myself, if it were me, is, okay, I've got imperfect or aorist. The aorist is the clearest thing to figure out if there is something else there, right? Because it either will have a stem change, because it's a second aorist, it'll look completely different, or it'll have a sigma of some sort in there. do we find, here's our root, right, graph, because we dropped the O. Do we find that there is a sigma or stem change? No. So we've already come a long way here. We have the imperfect tense. We already know it's indicative because we haven't learned anything else.
How'd you eliminate the errors again?
Notice how graph corresponds perfectly to grapho.
Yeah.
Graph. There's been no stem change. It doesn't look different internally, and there's been no sigma added.
Okay.
Because with a
And wasn't it sigma alpha?
sigma alpha,
All
right?
right,
Oh,
so because it's
okay, that's
missing the
right.
sigma alpha in the middle,
Yes.
we can
Okay.
hop to the imperfect.
We can eliminate it as an option, so we've got the imperfect. Now, our primary active, or our endings, so to speak, where does anta find itself?
Well,
Good, so we just learned this one, right? Anta. And this is an ending for what voices? It's
all passive.
right, it's right in front of you, middle passive. Our voices are active, middle, or passive. So now we can fill in here that it is either a middle or a passive because the imperfect shares the same endings,
Okay,
right? Our present shares the same endings for the middle passive. Our imperfect shares the same endings. Our aorist has middle endings and passive endings that are different. Our future has middle and passive endings that are different as well. So this can be either middle or passive.
and is this where you have to look at the context to choose
Correct.
which way to look?
Yep, so far we have the words of the prophet. Grapho means what, simply?
Were written?
Perfect. So, were written in the book. So, that is being interpreted as passive. They were written.
Is it not, were being written?
What he said,
Yes, perfect. Even better. Because when we translated it as were written, that is an aorist passive. They were written. But we have an imperfect passive. So we're stressing the continuing nature of it. So were being written. I'm glad I have you guys to catch me on these things.
For the words of the prophets were being written in the book.
Mm-hmm.
or being written.
Are being written in the book. All right, number 2 then.
Do you want to read it? I'll translate.
Okay, I graphai ton apostamon equanta hupo or hupa ton amartuo.
Good. Pronunciation is spot on.
So it would be there, the writing of the apostles Ekuanta is from Akuo, and there's in Ada in front. So that means there's been an epsilon added.
Good.
And I don't see a stem change or any sigma, so it's imperfect.
Perfect.
And amta is again the third plural. So the translation would be, was being heard.
Okay, that is very close. You missed one little thing. I was hoping you'd pick it up because you said it was third plural. Yes, Debbie.
But is it, is AI or alpha, iota, isn't that a plural?
Yes, and that was what I was hoping he'd see. You got the verb parsed perfectly, third plural.
So it's writings?
Yes. So the writings were being heard.
Oh, okay.
The writings of the writings of the apostles were being heard, hupaton hamartelon.
Why isn't it in that place? I guess it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing in that place.
By the sinners.
Great. Any questions on 2? Were being heard by the sinners. I think it's helpful to write up all the verbs and to go through this each time you
Yeah.
encounter one. I hope it is for you. I'm going to keep on doing that.
Yeah, the verbs are trickiest.
All right, 3.
En ekenais tais generais kalos edidaskamata ton matheton tu puri. Is that far demonstrative?
Yes.
So, in that
Make it plural.
day, in those days,
Because
in
it's
those-
ice.
and then it's adjectival phrase, article, adjective, or article, noun, adjective, so it's not attributive, it's not substantive either.
Are you talking about in
Carlos.
Kalos would,
oh, kalos? Look at your vocabulary. It's not in a adjectival relationship because kalos is not an adjective. Something that might help you in the future is that adverbs very often, but not always, take the os ending. So we have an adverb here that means
Good.
good or well or right.
and then the verb comes from didasko, which is to teach. The root is didact, so has it undergone a stem change, or?
Good question. It has not, because though its root is didax, its first principal part, and we haven't talked very much about principal parts, even though the vocabulary is there, is didask. So your first principal part, first PP is what we'll call it, build the present, the future, I believe. No, it does not because of the sigma. Present and the imperfect.
There's like 6 principal parts?
Yeah, and locating them for you specifically will be difficult for me because if I'd taken black for Greek grammar 1 and 2, he would have drilled that into me. That was not drilled into me before. Your first is your present and your imperfect. Your second is your future. Third, I think, is the aorist. About instead of me botching this horribly. On page 244, your present is your first principal part, and it also includes the imperfect. Future is your second. Aorist is your third, so it was right up until then. Perfect active is your fourth. Your perfect middle is the fifth. And your aorist passive is the sixth. And they're called principal parts because when you add certain things like the sigma for the future, the sigma alpha, and the augment for the aorist, the reduplication for the perfect, etc. Those are building You don't necessarily need to know that right now.
So you didn't really memorize it that way?
I didn't, probably is a big shortcoming.
Oh, really?
Because if you know your principal parts of regular verbs, it's helpful, it's not as helpful, but if you know your principal parts for irregular verbs, then it becomes very helpful.
Okay.
Like knowing the 6 principal parts of erchomai will be able to let you know all of those weird changes that take place. Like it goes from erchomai to elthon in the aorist. And that kind of thing is helpful. Especially when you're taking extra credit quizzes for Dr. Blau. And you need to compose. So we have a didascamen. We've located that it has an augment, which tells us, and we've already gotten our answer really, because no change has taken place. It's either imperfect or the aorist. We have the imperfect here. What voice do we have?
Middle or passive?
Good. Middle or passive. It's obviously indicative. Metha refers back to here, so it's a first plural.
So we were being taught.
Good. In those days,
We were being taught well
good.
by the disciples of the Lord.
Excellent. By the disciples of the Lord. Any questions there?
What was the beginning before we got to being taught well?
In those days,
In those days.
in Achanis, Tais, Hemarais, in those days. All right, Steve?
Tote exe po rut eto po axos ras ton curion nun de ukte lepe auto.
Okay.
Or oxlos is crowd.
Good.
Crowd.
What case is that in so it can help you in your translation?
Cases of the nominative.
Good. So that'll be your subject.
Okay.
Starting off, we have tate, and I'll help you there because it's new vocabulary. It means then. Then the crowd.
Well, I'm
Does
trying.
it mean then and when? Or
Oh, when, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, when.
Okay. Exepo.
Haruata.
Paruta. I have no idea.
What word is this from? Class help? I think you've had it. I know it was towards the end of last class.
Is this when you duplicate the front with the first two, but you change the letter because of,
No,
no?
not quite. This is what we call the compound.
So I'm guessing it's out something.
It's from where you am I? Or
Very close. But it's the compound form. So paruamai means to go or to walk. And here's where your favorite little tool helps out. To walk or to go ek. Out. Now what has happened here, to help things along, you remember when we have compound verbs, if we're to add the augment, they don't go to the front of the verb. They go in between the preposition and the verb. So that's what this is. What that tells us, it will either be imperfect or aorist. The other question might be where that C comes from. if you'll remember, ek can take, ek and I think even, what was the other word?
Outside, I think so.
No, can't remember it. It was one of the words we learned very, very early on. It may have been.
Ekbalo?
What now?
Ekbalo?
This isn't really instrumental to explaining it, but I'm trying to. Ooh. Right? Ooh can take the form of ooh, ook, and ooks, all depending upon what word is followed. Because of the fact that there's a vowel here, the kappa changes to exceed. That's where that's coming from. All right, so we have aorist or imperfect. Do we have any changes to the stem? Which would be par u. Par u. We don't. We don't have any changes to the stem. We don't have an addition of a sigma or anything like that. So we will have an imperfect verb. And because of the fact that he likes middle passives, since we're in the chapter for middle passives, ta, we have a third singular, imperfect, middle passive, indicative verb, meaning go out. We did all of that work, and what are we going to do with it? Doesn't mean a thing. Means a thing for knowing. Knowing is half the battle. No, but paruamai. Do we recall anything about paruamai?
Doesn't have an active form.
It doesn't have an active form. Right. Remember, our verbs that we've been learning have been like luo. They have an omega ending. There were some verbs like erkomai, paruamai, dunamai, etc. that have that my ending because they don't have active forms in the present or the imperfect. So we just did all of that work to find out that it is a middle passive indeed, but it's a deponent verb. So we're going to translate it as if it were active. So it's imperfect, middle passive, but translated as if it were active. When the crowd
Now,
was going out.
why on page 100 is tote and this tote 4?
That's right. I was right. It's like that has to mean then.
So then, not when.
Yes.
Then.
Tate. Indeed. If you're looking in your lexicon in the back of the book, it's on page 253. Tate means then. Pate means when. Yeah, and a bad pun just came into my head. When do we go to the pate?
You're gonna have to study that.
P and T.
How old is?
He's coming up on 3 months and a week, I think, but didn't remember. No, maybe a couple more days than that. It's 2.5. It'll be a while before he starts going to the potty. Okay, so then the crowd went out, or was going out, sorry. It's still imperfect, we still translate the tense. When the crowd was going out. Finish off.
Okay, to the Lord.
To the Lord, good.
And I forgot what you mean, so I just put them in a lexicon.
I'll help you out there. Or the class will help you
Look it
out.
up. Now,
Yep, now.
now when the crowd was going out to the Lord,
Then the crowd was going out to the Lord.
now the kete,
Remember this word. Remember de, which means and or but.
now, but I'm saying kete is a not instruction with emphasis.
No longer.
Saw.
Sees him. It's tricky here. So then the crowd was going out to the Lord. De is coming second in that next clause, but we should translate it first. So, but, noon, now, but now, it, because we're taking aklos as the subject from the previous clause, but it no longer sees him, the Lord. But now, the crowd no longer sees the Lord. If you want it to be expansionistic. All right, 5.
Ta Demonia Pantote Ezuvala Eto En To Logo to Kubio.
Okay.
The Vala Eto has to do with throwing.
Yes. This is very similar to the last verb we parsed. Not that it's deponent. You don't have to worry about that.
Is it from ekbal?
Yes, it is from ekbalo.
Was that throwing out?
Yes. This is another instance where the fundering fallacy works because ek is out, balo is to throw out, or to cast out.
And Eto is third person singular?
Good. So we have third singular, and you found your ending over there, which means it's middle or passive. What other identifying marks do we see in here to help us give us the tense?
You got that the epsilon there.
And center, good. So that means it's either an imperfect or an aorist. Do we see any other changes in here that might indicate that it's an aorist?
There's no saw.
There's no saw. In the case of balo is a second aorist, and one of these little lamids would drop out if it were an aorist. And it's
Is
not.
that lambda?
Yes.
Okay. Lambist. That's a camel in South America.
It's also the Hebrew
I didn't even notice.
equivalent. Lambda.
Should
You
we
can
go
tell
back
that
to-
I'm working primarily in Hebrew this semester. All right, so there's no indication that it's an aorist, so we're imperfect, middle, passive, and then we have the indicative because we haven't learned anything else. We get the C because, again, we have the epsilon in there now.
Now, I don't know what ta daimonia.
Pronounce it ta daimonia. Maybe that might help. Yes.
Okay.
And this is ta, not ta. I'm not kidding with you. Visually, it's different. It's ta, not ta. So keep that in mind in your translation.
Okay, so what is pantote?
Always. It's one of the new vocab words.
Now, if I was winging this, because it's something in the word of the Lord,
Yes, in the word of the Lord.
so if it has to do with demons,
Now, here's a tricky, this is a sentence that is laden with sneakiness.
Demonic.
Forgive the reference. In
Right now, I'm not ready for sneakiness.
You don't believe anything.
in to lago. We want to translate this simply as in the word, right? In the word of the Lord, I think.
Mhm.
But in can also be idiomatically translated as by. Good. By the word of the Lord. And that might help with our translation just a bit. So the last bit is by the word of the Lord. And do we have, what is our subject?
I thought it was the demons.
Perfect. And this is why
And
it's
it's a-
also tricky.
And isn't it female?
Yeah.
It's neuter.
Oh, you're right. I don't remember, I believe it is plural.
It is.
So it's the demons, pentote, I don't remember what that word means.
Always. The demons.
The demons always
I was on page 100.
thrown out by the word of the Lord? I mean, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, very close. The demons were always being thrown out by the word of the Lord. Now, the reason I said it's tricky is because you identified it as third singular,
Mhm.
but our subject is plural, right? Daimonia. Remember, it's an aggregate noun, collective plural. Plurals, neuter plurals can go with singular verbs. Cantate is an adverb, which adverbs can modify verbs. So it's easiest to take the adverb with the verb. The demons were always being cast out by the word of the Lord.
I'm not certain on the is it a reduplication? Oh, it's not, it's just it goes with the stem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just talked it through myself.
Yep.
Okay. Because it's what do you call it? Compound verb?
Mm-hmm. So let's, instead of talking through it, let's write through it. We have follow. We can compound a verb. So now we have ek, follow. Now we want to put it in the past tense with continuing force, so we would choose the imperfect. But we can't, since it is compounded, add the augment here. Now with uncompounded verbs, what would happen there is it would go from an epsilon to an eta, right? If it were an alpha or an epsilon, it gets linked into the eta. But it is a compound verb and we have a different option. So we have ek here, we put our augment here, ek follow. I'm not touching the ending, obviously, just leaving it the same. That's an incorrect conjugation. But now we have a problem here because we have kappa in between the augment. So we changed it to x, ball. All right. Let's go to number 6.
Hoiakloi exer kantan ectes eremu kai iser kantan estain ecclesian.
Good.
The crowds, exer kantan is
Crap.
go.
Mm-hmm.
The
close. It's close to Ericomai. It's from Ek Ericomai.
Back here. Okay.
I think it's Ek, not Ek. No, it would be X Ericomai. Because it already has the epsilon in there.
Okay.
Okay, so before you keep on translating, let's do a exercise in futility here, because it really will be. You know what I mean already? What do we've got going on?
First person.
So, the epsilon being inserted between the, I don't know what you call it, the prepositional.
So we've got an eta here. So the epsilon has been lengthened. So it's been inserted, that works. It's the augment. Again, imperfect or aorist. Any other changes?
Ericomai to Erkuta.
Erconta.
Erkanta. Oh. Doesn't look like it.
No, good. Plus, I know that elf is the aorist. It's the second aorist. All right, so we have an imperfect. It's going to be an indicative. What is our ending? On top.
Which is third plural.
Third plural, okay. And then where did you go to get that ending? Did you get it from a middle passive ending set?
Yes.
Good, so on top, third plural, M.
Middle
P.
passive.
Now, why is this an exercise in futility?
It's the middle of it.
Good. Ericomai is a deponent verb, so we're just going to translate it as if it were active.
So, but if you were parsing it on a test, you would say deponent.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you need to get that information.
Point is,
Some professors will accept middle or passive. Black, if you were doing it for him, he'd accept middle or passive, but if you translated it, I mean, if you parsed it that way, you had to translate it that way. All right, so we've got that, and it means what? Exercomai means
To go out.
to go out. Good. And you'd already said the crowds. Remember, it's imperfect.
Went out.
We're going.
We're going. From the wilderness.
when we cover imperfect, we have I was destroyed. When
Yes.
I was going out, but not
Be-
were going
Because this is plural.
Plural.
If you were to say the crowds was going out, it would work, right?
Yeah.
The helping verb changes according to the person number. Good, so the crowds were going out from the wilderness. And this is the next clause.
And going into the church.
Perfect. And parsing eis erkanta isn't really worth our time, only because the only thing that has changed between ex erkanta and eis erkanta is the preposition. So it's gone from go out to enter, or to go in. All right. If we go any further, then that means you don't have anything to work through on yourself, by yourself.
Okay.
So
We
I'm
gotta pick
thinking
up choir people too.
that we will go ahead and wrap it up. Do you have any questions on this? Has this helped at least in refreshing some of the stuff from before?
Yeah, Jake, you're not going to rust off.
We're not going to what now?
Rust off.
Good. And I think that this, the parsing up here may be helping. I hope that it is.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait.
Because otherwise I'd be just hitting my head.
So in the coming weeks, I'm going to keep on doing that. Each time we encounter a verb, we're going to stop and we're going to do this. this because I'm hoping that as we go a little bit further, we'll get more to parse. Or more of a variety so we can start to knock some more of the rust off. Your homework is to learn the new forms, learn the vocabulary, and then to finish 7 through 12 of the translations. And I'll have a quiz for you.
Still in 2 weeks?
What now?
Still in 2 weeks?
Yes, still in 2 weeks. I'm taking the next week off to go to the mountains.